time.
There you go.
Here we go. So welcome to Master the World. We are on kit 146A. Today we have Madeline Triffon and Evan Goldstein, Master Sommeliers, taking us through the 6 wines. Maddie?
Hello, everyone. I had tried to mute to spare you from my occasional coughing. I have a little tickle in my throat, so I apologize if I have to do that on occasion, but I promise you this is working fine. And cheers to everyone, wherever you may be. So we're going to miss Tim, but cheers to you, Tim. Hopefully you're enjoying 75% dew point, right? Or 75 dew point and 90 Fahrenheit in Florida. Per usual, we have some questions to consider, and I am going to try to power through number 1 because I have the happy but rueful reputation of dragging my feet through the first wine. And welcome especially to everyone who hasn't done this before with us. So some things to think about, I was going to say monetizing, but quantifying the acidity and the alcohol. This is very useful, not only for deductive reasoning, but also to get yourself to know yourself as a taster. And, I'm not setting you up for yes, it does, no, it doesn't, but really see if there is a pronounced inorganic rocky minerality in this wine or not. It might be a reflection of something or another, either grape variety wise or region. So thank you for doing show and tell on the color, Limaine, because against a white surface, it tells far more stories than not. And this, to me, in this tasting right now, appears to be actually more of a pale yellow in my room, but with green glints, which connotes youth. And aromatically, it's very giving. I was a little worried about it about 15 minutes ago because it took a moment to wake up, but this is giving me several layers, of which the first is a florality. I get this wave of specifically fresh flowers that are citrus and tree fruit blossoms. So lemon and lime blossoms, apple blossoms, really pretty. And right on the heels of that, actual citrus. So both lemon and lime, maybe even a little sweet citrus like Meyer lemon. And like I just cut a green apple open. I actually do get a stoniness to this wine right out of the gate that I'm going to be curious to see if you do. And herbal wise, I get more citrus related fresh herbs like chervil and verbena. It's very, very pretty and actually still opening up. I'm following it. It's like we're slowly turning the volume up on gentle music. There's a little bit of a tropical tone to this in the form of maybe pineapple, but just a kiss. And I'm curious to see if this is going to incarnate on the palate stone fruit, like fresh and perfectly ripe, maybe peaches, nectarines. Let's see what happens when we taste it. I'm going to go ahead and take it on the palate. I am from the school that still slurps. I don't know if the young generation of tasters is doing that, but I find it connects my sense of smell to my sense of taste. And whoa, the attack is a surprise because there is the citrus in the form of fresh lime, fresh lemon, absolutely green apple, and a burst, even an attack of acidity that is actually wonderful. It doesn't lean out, it fleshes out the rest of the flavors, which is fascinating to me. I'm going to take another taste immediately so that my palate has gotten used to the acidity and I can perceive more flavor. As promised, I swallowed a little bit. And when I hold it there for a second, mid-palate, I'm getting a plum line of flavor, which does include absolutely stone fruit, like perfectly ripe, virgin, and slightly underripe. You pick them, peaches, nectarines, apricots, that type of thing. But there again, there's the citrus, there's the green apple, maybe underripe pear, and the florality is on the palate too, like chewing on these citrus and apple blossoms with lemon tinged fresh herbs. It's delicious. There is, interestingly, I think it's an illusion of sweetness. I don't think there's actual RS in this wine. And speaking about structure for a moment, in addition to the acidity being high, I think that the alcohol is very balanced and not low, but I would say medium. It just melts into the wine. It barely pulls your attention. So if I had to put a number on it, and I don't often do this, I would say 11, 12 plus, something like that. So what are we with? We are with a wine that has high acidity, a richness mid-palate with an illusion of sweetness. There might be a skosh of residual, but with compelling acidity, citrus fruit, fresh flowers, and green herbs, and a little bit of stone fruit. On the palate, I think that minerality is definitely there. And if you want to speak in the chat room, I'm curious if you are finding it as well, because, it isn't that we talk ourselves into it. If you can imagine this wine without it, you will know what I mean. It will have more of a simplicity to it. This is speaking to be a young wine that's got a life ahead of it. And I'm reminding myself of the vintage, and it wasn't born yesterday. So this is a specific wine and a style of wine that can handle and actually begs for bottle age. I think that's good, Evan, don't you? We can see I did a good job. I powered
I did.
through it.
I did. The only comment I had that I was trying to figure out, if you said you talked about monetizing acidity later, and if I think you did that, I'd have to put you in jail. Monetizing
Yeah.
acid? Sorry,
Well,
this came out.
You're talking to someone who 1,000,000 years ago flirted with the hippie culture in Ann Arbor. So there you go. Truth and fiction. But I look good. Anyway, here we are in grape varieties and regions that we are considering. So we have Gruner Veltliner, Riesling, and Semillon. I like to take it down to basic categories. Riesling is certainly considered a highly aromatic grape variety that's known for its thumbprint of Riesling, of acidity, high acidity. Gruner is, depending on the expression and the producer, the quality level, it is verging on semi-aromatic plus grape variety that can absolutely have very firm acidity, rarely, if ever, shows any oak influence. And in my estimation, tends to be a little bit more muscular, but both of those can show strong evidence of inorganic earth. And then finally, Semillon, or as I think the Aussies say, Semillon, or somebody says Semillon, is more of a neutral grape variety. It has an aroma, just not a strong one, and it's known for a little bit of a waxy mouthfeel. And our countries are corresponding to the grape varieties. Austria, Germany, Washington State makes great Riesling. So if you're going in that direction, ask yourself Old World, New World. And finally, Australia for Semillon, Semillon. Good. How are we
Excellent.
doing? Remember, we are not voting. And it is utterly, nobody's going to be flashing your name on the screen going, Judy said it was yada and how wrong you are. We don't do that. So
we're going to give everybody 20 more seconds because I think this was the warm-up wine for voting. And everyone just needs to, just put an answer in, guys. You've got 20 seconds to do it. It's anonymous. No one's going to judge you. And if you did think it was something else or someplace else, please don't be shy in putting it into the chat room to say. It's definitely a good teaching moment. And you'd be surprised. There'll be other people who say, oh, yeah, I thought that too. So right now, Maddie, as the votes are coming in, we are seeing about 82% thinking that it's old world. So, as we're waiting, what points to old world or new world here in this particular wine?
Well, I think certainly, though this is changing, with climate change, this is not a phantom thing we're talking ourselves into. And it used to be that you could rely on, in many regions of the New World, a higher alcohol level, and the reverse in Europe, which is the old world, right? And people argue about South Africa, but, in terms of where it's going, old or new. But I think certainly the paying attention and checking yourself on the inorganic earthiness, and in this particular case, I think the alcohol level is speaking to certainly a more moderate to cooler growing region. But I think this grape variety also speaks to minerality as well, and this is my opinion. Don't forget about everyone, because you may have an idea we hadn't thought of, and even if it doesn't fit the boat officially, it could be a spectacular alternative to what we've got up here.
Yep.
And
I love Venkat going for the contrarian Hunter Valley Semillon. Let's see where everybody ends up here. As you can see in the results, we have quite a
I think
old world
almost
contingent.
everybody voted, which is great.
Yes,
Thank you for
absolutely.
doing
Vote
that.
early, vote often.
And we are getting on our plane. We are leaving the New World. I will tell you right up front. I have my usual aisle seat in business class that somebody's been kind enough to buy me because I wouldn't get it for myself. And we are going to, yes, Germany. We are going specifically to the Rheingau, which is, I believe, the smallest of the delineated growing regions in Germany, but modern viticulture was born here. This is a producer. I don't know if it's George in German or if it's pronounced differently, brewer. I am pathetic at German pronunciation. I do a really good job on Greek, and I can fake French and Spanish very well, but Evan hasn't taught me about Portuguese. This is a producer. Oh, look how beautiful that map is. It shows you that they're right at the curve of the Rheingau before it goes up north, moving from east to west, or west to east, I guess. Yeah, east to west if you're going in that direction. It is a producer that is based in Rudesheim, and actually has holdings. Look how close they are to the river. They have holdings in the three most famous vineyards, Berg Roseneck, Berg Rotland, and Berg Schlossberg. This particular wine, it's really cool. Oh, look, there they are. If you look up to the north, where am I going to put my, can you see my my pointer here? Do you see LORCH? Go north river, heading to Schlossberg. This wine is from that township. I had to look it up because I hadn't experienced it before. To remind us all, the Rheingau has all premium south-facing slopes. I mean, it is, you know, nirvana for Riesling production. And there, you know, depending on the vineyard area, there's different configurations of soil, but again, apologies for my coughing, but very strong slate presence everywhere. It is actually significantly warmer than the Rheinhessen. So the wines have quite a degree of concentration, and this is, if we can show the label, indeed a Trocken. However, officially, when I looked up the handy dandy little tech sheet that, thank you all the producers that are getting used to doing that and providing that for us. This has a skosh of RS, 6 grams per liter, which just goes to show you the power of that acidity. Alcohol, they're claiming 12%. And per usual, they've got a little bit of wiggle room, but I'm sure these folks are telling the truth. Bernard, who really put into motion a lot of the changes in a positive fashion at this estate, died shockingly and quickly before the age of 60, and his daughter is now running this estate. They are given credit for actually being the driving force behind the Carta movement to produce Trocken wines, and also behind the movement to recognize crews or, you know, specific sites. Marcus is the winemaker. I don't think he has a relationship to the family, but he's kicking out wines that are internationally recognized. And look at those spectacular terraced vineyards. There's no way any little machine is getting anywhere near those. And anytime I go to Germany, I just think, I don't know if I could walk up and down those slopes. This is a moderately sized estate, around 40 hectares, depending on what source you look up. And as I said, they are known for Trocken production, and over 80% of their production is Riesling. Though they do produce a little bit of Pinot Noir and other varietals. I'll tell you what's really shocking me about this wine, and then I'm handing it to you, Evan. This is a wine that's going, whoa, it's just opening up in the glass. It really speaks to its longevity. And here's my opinion. I think Riesling travels the globe with a little pocket of rocks. So it tends to, and those of you who have tasted Australian Rieslings will know this, regardless of it's in the New World or the Old, it will show that minerality just as an expression of the varietal. And can we clarify trocken? So it's produced dry. Actually, I would say bone dry, even with the Scotia of RS. And the alcohol is fluttering around 12%. And I love the fact that we have someone brand new to blind tasting. Welcome. You're our favorite person in the room.
All right, so two things. If you're putting comments into the chat, make sure you do it to everybody. Otherwise, we're the only ones seeing your questions. The question was, can you clarify trocken, which Madeline just did. And if you're curious about alcohol at any point in time, it is actually on the back of the label. If you just take out that little sticker, you'll see all the details. So don't do it until you're ready to reveal, but peel to reveal is our mantra here when you're ready. Maddie, just one thing before you give it to Evan, or maybe Evan, you want to answer this. The petrol quality that people look for in Riesling, was that obvious to you here? Did you get it at all? What's happening with that?
Take that, Evan, because I really didn't get it. I mean, it might be just a skosh.
The reality with TDN, that sort of petrol-y, diesel fuel-y, Chateau Exxon character that you get in Rieslings is a factor of one or two things, and they sort of go hand in hand. Generally, it's when the fruit gets exposed to a lot of light. And it's mostly associated with young wines, particularly in Australia. So if you have Clare or Eden Valley Rieslings, they are chock full of diesel fuel when they're younger. You do find them in wines from sort of the Germany, Alsace area, but they tend to develop over time. So you'll find that if this wine has a touch of it. What did you call it? A skosh, Madeline? But if you come back to this wine in 5 to 8 years, you'll start to develop. But once again, in cooler years, you're generally not going to see it at all, simply because of the way the sunlight hits there, where it's very, very classic in young Australian wine. So it specifically has to do with sunlight and exposure to light.
And to the person who just openly said, I'm new to blind tasting and I thought it was Loire Sauvignon Blanc, bravo to you for putting yourself on the line. And the only thing I would add, acidity would definitely lead me in that direction. Sauvignon Blanc is also known for it. It would have perhaps less floral and more of an overt sort of grapefruity citrus and more compelling green elements.
Yeah, and I just one last comment, and we'll move into wine too. There were a couple of I'm not good at doing the hand rubbing, reading the comments, and responding at the same time thing. But a number of people thought that this might be Hunter Valley Semillon. Semillon, Australian Semillon, very, very, if ever, gives you stone fruit. It really is sort of a study in citrus and tree fruit of more of the appley vein, but it's really more usually about varying elements of citrus, maybe a hint of tropicality, but you don't generally find peaches, nectarines, plums, anything with a stone in it in a Semillon. It just doesn't happen.
However, somebody brought up Chenin, right?
Yeah,
and Chenin will have even more overt stone fruit, but it will also have an element that we call either I call it wet wool because I used to wash cashmere sweaters when I could afford them. Maybe a Scotia botrytis that will come up in the form of like ginger, right? Which, and by the way, this producer is like very anti-botrytis, so they're very careful. But you can definitely confuse Chenin Blanc and Riesling because they're both aromatic grape varieties. So that's a good subject to bring up.
Good thing. That's a good thing. All right. Let's move now on to wine number 2. Same old drill. You know it well. Take a look, take a smell, take a taste. Eventually, always look for a few things. F for fruit, E for earth, W for wood. Those are the ways I remember my wines. But I think a couple things to just keep in the back of your mind as you're evaluating this wine. Is it dry or is it fruity? Fruity is going to be that sort of explosion of literally fruit that's there, but it doesn't necessarily equate to sweetness. Dryness is simply the absence of sugar. So wines can be fruity and dry at the same time. They could also be fruity and sweet, but don't confuse the two of them whatsoever and think about how they correlate. The second thing is this wine, Madeline's wine is very floral. Is this equally floral? Is it about fruit? And if it's about fruit, what kind of fruit? Peaches, apples, citrus, we talked about before, tropical fruit, we talked about before, or some they're a combination of, or maybe it's not a fruit-driven wine. I guess time will tell. And then lastly, one of the things that we talk about a lot, particularly with white wines, where oftentimes there aren't other things at play there, is the texture of the wine. Is it lean, mean, and austere? Is it rich, round, and creamy, somewhere in between? So think about that as you're going through it. But when you look at this wine, right off the bat, it doesn't have quite as deep a richness of pigmentation as the wine Madeline had. It's a little bit less volume there. It's probably relatively absent. It is bright as the day. It's really refracting a lot of light out of it. And once again, it does show a tremendous amount of green sheen, sort of as a back color there. And green will always equal a combination of either cool climate or a cool year, or youth, or some combination thereof. So if I ever do see a little bit of green there, that's a North Star for me to start thinking. And again, correlating ideas, but I'm not going to go clue on you yet. Colonel Mustard, Wrench, Library, until I get further down the road. Okay, for those of us who are old enough to remember Clue. People don't play Clue anymore, I don't think. All right, most of the information is really going to be here. I swirl it around. I'm looking at any forming of the legging and the tiering. I'm not getting a lot. In fact, I'm not getting any. If anything, it's kind of sheeting down the sides of the glass. The slower the tiering, the higher the alcohol. The slower the tiering, the higher the sugar. Oftentimes, alcohol and sugar go together, as in the form of dessert wines or ports, fortified wines, things like that. But that doesn't have that. So I'm seeing right off the bat just what suggests to me to be a lower alcohol, youthful wine. Boom, that's all I get right now. Now I'm going to smell. All of the pudding is in the smell. If you can't smell, you can't taste. So really, if anything, spend more time here than anywhere else. Break it down to FEW. Am I getting fruit here? Absolutely getting fruit here. What kind of fruit am I getting here? Getting a lot of tart fruit here. Again, sort of in that citrus vein that Madeline spoke of before, but even more amplified. I'm getting lemon, I'm getting lime, I'm getting zest, I'm getting yuzu, I'm getting kumquat, I'm getting all of those sort of tart citric elements to me here. There is a bit of apple, but it is very unripe, sort of acid, hard acid. Green apple, maybe a little bit of quince. Don't eat unripe quince. Don't eat raw quince. Your stomach will not be a happy camper. And then maybe even from the tropical standpoint, probably crunchy unripe melon, maybe a little star fruit for people who eat star fruit, things like that. Maybe a bit of unripe pineapple too, if you ever had the opportunity to have a pineapple before it gets ripe. Then there's a little bit of other stuff going on. Again, organic, but not necessarily fruit. Maybe a little bit of ginger. Maybe a little bit of, again, sort of lemon thyme, lemon verbena kind of thing going on there. And then underneath that, earth, yeah, maybe a little bit of crushed rock, but not certainly driving, not as minerally as the wine that Madeline just came through that was at once sort of limey, slaty, chalky, all kind of at the same time. Am I getting wood? Am I getting toast? Am I getting butterscotch? Am I getting baking spice? Am I getting caramel? Am I getting anything like that? And the answer is no. So probably suggest to me that if there is wood involved, it's either older or larger or a combination of both. But I'm not thinking barriques here, small barrels, things that would give you obvious overt wood influence. Let's go ahead and taste. I'm like Madeline, suck it in, bring as much air in. Aeration in your palate is the equivalent of swirling it and smelling it. So as much air as you can bring in is going to activate the esters and aldehydes, are all the aromatic components of the wine here. What I'm getting here in the mind is, again, a very bright attack, a very shrill attack, a very zippy, zesty, refreshing attack. The wine is very much defined by this sort of tart citric character, a lot of acidity in the wine, almost bearing on the liquid electricity vein of stuff like that. Fairly lean, which again suggests no wood whatsoever, probably never got out of a stainless steel tank, maybe a concrete vat, but I'd say maybe stainless steel here. And it's dry. It is tart. And again, there's this sort of sense that it wants to jump out of the glass more. Madeline's wine kept expanding as it sat in the glass. This one is expanding a little bit too, but at a much slower pace, which suggests to me that a grape that evolves without as much speed. What else about it? The acid level is a medium plus high, probably high going to medium plus. Alcohol level moderate. My chest doesn't feel lit up like a jack-o'-lantern. The wine didn't have a lot of legging before. It's bone dry, even drier than Madeline's Trocken wine. And once again, I'm not getting any oak, which would give me any roundness or flavor. Definitely suggests to me to be sort of a very pure, fruit-driven, soft earthiness on the side. Where could we go with this wine? Well, we could go in the Albarino vein of Iberia, or even other places where they grow Albarino. But again, that's going to give you that sort of semi-aromatic character, a little bit more stonier fruits perhaps, but you can have strong citric elements. Alvarinho in Portugal, Albarino in Spain and other parts of the world. Could be Chardonnay. Chardonnay is a relatively neutral variety until you start doing stuff to it. Semillon or Semillon blend. Madeline talked about those examples that exist in Australia earlier, where they oftentimes, remember when they used to call it Hunter Valley Riesling before they figured out what Semillon was? And now you have, but you also have places like Washington State, Madeline mentioned before, Bordeaux, of course, where it gets blended with Sauvignon Blanc a lot, and even a little Muscadel de Bordelais, but it can also be pure and straightforward, like you would find in Washington, like you would find in Australia, other regions, and then blending these things together. Northern Italian Chardonnay is kind of right? Spain, it could be that Albarino thing. Australia could be a lot of those things, and ditto California. But the wine has a very distinctive point of view, maybe not as expressive in many ways, but also perhaps I think affected somewhat by being just a very youthful wine. Going back and looking at it now, that greenness is even coming through a bit more.
We have some interesting descriptors coming through. Green grape, solid bubble gum, stone fruit, citrus. So I think you've got some vends on some of the things that you said there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only one I'm not getting so much of a bubblegummy thing. You know, there is if you were to like over chew your juicy fruit gum and you get past that sort of wave of tropicality and all that, and then you know how when you chew gum for a long time, the flavor kind of dies down, and then you're just chewing. It's just that, and again, that's perhaps what this has, maybe the tail end of something like that, but maybe not as effusive as bubble gum, something like that. A lot of tart citrus here, and again, perhaps some stuff. I'm not getting a lot of stone fruit here personally, and if I do, it's probably more in the neutral style of like plum or something, or pluot. We got a lot of Albarino and Alvarinos, which is a lot about stone fruit and citrus. Not that many votes for Chardonnay. A few folks on Semillon, okay.
No,
and
others. Come on, other people.
Other people. Where are other people? Where are those people? And then obviously a strong correlation between the Albarino and Spain. Probably a strong correlation between the Australia and the Semillons, and then the California probably is floating with the Chardonnay. So we're kind of in interesting spots here, all interesting calls. I guess we'll find out where we land momentarily.
So Evan, given where the first wine was, and this is a 70+% old world, and as we pull this up here, and 30% new world, what tips would you have given folks to compare between the first wine and this wine to
I'm not
old
getting
world versus new?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back now, and if you haven't hoovered all of your wine, if you did, you drank a lot of wine, go back and retaste that first wine now again, and not only smell it for a little bit of that stoniness and minerality, but taste it, and you'll notice that texturally, it's like somebody took a couple of chalk erasers and went in your mouth, and it actually coats. There's a grittiness to the first wine where you don't have any of that in the second wine. So earthiness is not only tactilely or it's tactile, I should say, as well as being something you smell and something you taste. This wine is absent of anything like that in a strong pronounced thing, which means that we took a really quick flight, although we went a long way. We went down to the Southern Hemisphere. And I wonder if people tasted wine too first and wine once. Just joking. But this is, in fact, a Semillon, and it is from the Hunter Valley, and it is Australian, or maybe it's Hunter Valley Riesling. Who knows? But we are in a place in the world that specializes, from its white wine point of view, in these in this sort of style. And what Semillon is known for in this part of the world is exactly what we talked about, which is really having that sense of sort of shrill citric fruit, maybe not as limey as you would find in some of the Rieslings, but it really all is about the the kumquats and the yuzu and the really tart lemon. And it is both about the pit, the zest and the fruit as well too. What's cool about the Hunter is you're actually close to Sydney. So if you're going to visit Sydney, it's literally a day trip that you can do. In fact, it's probably got some of the best enotourism of all of Australia. The challenge with the Hunter Valley is that they don't grow a lot of fruit. So you have to look really carefully on the label, because chances are, if you go to a big concert or something like that, or go to one of these big summer parties that they do up there, when you look at the label, it'll say like South Australia or something like that, because they don't, it's actually a small wine production region. And the two grapes it's most known for are Semillon for white and Shiraz for red, which nobody actually talks about, which is kind of a shame. But Great Hunter Valley Semillon is a wine that is both wonderful in its youth. This is a very young wine, but most of the Aussies will tell you that it really hits its stride at about 6 years of age. So they actually practice, most of the traditional producers in the Hunter practice a thing called bottle and bury, which is to say that they'll release half of a wine and then they'll bury the other half for 6 years and they bring it out. So anytime a new release comes out in classic Aussie houses, you'll get a wine from the current vintage and a wine that's 6 years behind it, because as they develop, as they get older, they pick up more of this sort of toasty, brioche, marmalade-y kind of things, a little bit honeyed, and a lot of complexity, and the richness and that texture and that beeswaxiness that Madeline talked about is something that comes with time. It picks up weight with time. It tends to be kind of that bright, lean, and mean thing that we talked about here. So this producer is Brokenwood. Brokenwood is considered to be one of the hallmark wineries in the Hunter Valley. It was started by a couple gentlemen, three of them back in 1970, of which the most famous individual was a gentleman named James Halliday, who's considered to be one of the great experts of wine in all of Australia, along with the late Glenn Evans. And they started this wine together, three blokes from Sydney, wanted to do something there, fell in love with the area. They were smart enough about 10 years later to figure out they really didn't have any idea what they were doing. They hired a gentleman named Ian Riggs, who was there from 82 to 2000, who was the winemaker who really put Brokenwood on the map. He handed it over to the current winemaker, Stuart Horton, who is doing a spectacularly good job. And what this is a very unique wine. It's a benchmark around the world as far as style, to say Semillon from Australia. And you see it here, there's Stuart, and you see it in Margaret River. Those are the two areas that, to me, that are most known for Semillon. And it's got bright acid, it's got citric fruit, and they age forever. It is the best value on the market for wine keepers, because you can buy a wine for probably around 20-ish something, and you could literally sit on it for 10 years. And the wine will be bright and refreshing, different over time as the fruit develops and some oxidative elements go in, but they're beautiful. And then obviously they're almost all aged exclusively in screw cap, which means, of course, the aging process is much more gradual. That's a pretty clean shot of the property, which sits at 35 acres. It's equally known for its amazing Shiraz, and they make a particularly fabulous graveyard vineyard appellation Shiraz, which is not bony per se, but it really produces a great wine, a little bit leaner, not as flamboyant as what you might find in the Barossa, the Vale, etc., but really, really good. But to me, this house is all about their Semillon, and Stuart is a master with that grape.
I want to just
So Rebecca has
I just want to tag team with Evan to say that, you know, what's extraordinary and almost counterintuitive about Australian Semillon is the fact that you have that beautiful, compelling acidity, but if you hold it mid-palate, it's actually got a waxiness, a thickness, a silkiness to it as well that coexists. And when Evan says these are age-worthy, he's not kidding. I had one recently that was 15 years old and tasted fresh and like it was just coming into its own. So it's worth looking for those, or you can do your own bottle and bury and bottle.
Either way,
bottle and berry
exercise by buying 2 bottles and parking one. Sorry, Limang, you were going to say?
So I want to bring up a question that someone here has posed. Rebecca posed it, and it says, I sometimes get a reductive, almost TDN diesel-like note in Hunter Valley, especially when it has some age. Does anyone notice that too?
I'm not getting any reduction per se. I think you can get, I've had a little bit of TDN in some Hunter Valley, and actually more so in the Margaret River Semillons. And again, I think that's that sort of exposure and that light thing. that you get there can get awfully warm and awfully, as you can see from this vineyard here, quite exposed to light. Canopy management can manage it a little bit in terms of protecting the fruit, but it can develop over time. It's certainly not to the strength that it happens with Riesling. I think those two go kind of hand in hand, but it's not completely unusual. But usually as they get older, and if you do see a little bit of TDN, you're a good taster, because usually more of the oxidative notes kind of cover that over, although it can be in the back.
Great. All right. We got, I think that we'll save that question so that we can move on to number 3, Venkat. I hope you're going to be here a little later. If not, we'll answer this question in a post email. All right, wine number 3. Maddie, I think it's back to you.
Red wine, yay. And I will say, hold the thought when we talk about that last question, because I think the florality of Albariño is really what distinguishes it from Semillon, the short version. Yeah. So
we should address it later on, because so many people went Spain and Albariño. That's a good call.
No, good point. Thank you, Li Meng.
No stone fruit in this wine.
So, and not only yay, red wine color is always too much fun, but this one in particular is a little intriguing. And what are we talking about question wise? Look for rim variation. So what you're looking for is the core color, and then let your eye move to the very rim to see if the hue lightens or if the hue changes, because that can be deductive reasoning tell. And then again, we're looking for what kind of, if any, earthiness it's got. And don't get too precious about it. I mean, to me, organic earthiness is like digging in the garden, right? Or forest floor, if we're talking Bordelaise. And then interesting fruit and floral expressions. I wrote this and I still find it interesting. Noticing them, but also trying to qualify if it's more like potpourri or more like you just clipped a rose, avoiding the thorns. So in looking at this color, I put my finger underneath it. It's not opaque, but it's pretty dense, true ruby mid palette, gorgeous ruby color. And then when I let my eye travel to the rim, it does lighten, but there is subtle hue variation. And note to self, that can be the result of either bottle age, a combo of bottle and barrel, or it can be an expression of a couple 3 red grape varieties that do that even in their youth, because the very rim has a tinge of yellow in it. So this, noticing this and describing it, I think it's very important that we don't, in our desperation to determine what it is, get married to an idea this early on, especially if you haven't even put it on your nose. And
date your wine.
Yes.
Don't
you can just turn the glass, or you can swirl it. Either way, I've been playing with that because and speaking of our esteemed colleague Tim, after tasting with him for a week, I noticed on his first approach he often just turns it. So I've been playing with that. And aromatically on this, I immediately get red fruit in a combination of perfectly ripe, and you pick it, cherries, red plums, strawberries, and then some of it's dried as well, and I'm curious if that will appear on the palate. So red and dried, red berry fruit, a touch of black, maybe black cherry, tart black fruit, and then also definitely floral. But for me, in this particular nose, it's more dried roses, maybe a little jasmine, maybe some fresh too, but it's more like I just, took some potpourri and ran my hands through it and smelled it, greedy a person that I am. And also I'm getting plenty of dried herbs. You pick it. I'm Greek, so I can't help but mention oregano. And there is a little bit of an expression of truffle on this, like mushroom truffle. There's a little licorice, maybe red licorice, and a dustiness to the nose. Apologies, that little tickle is returning. So, the organic earth in the smell of this wine is presenting itself like clay or dust. I'm going to go ahead and take it on the palate. It should be mentioned that to get that many categories on the first approach to what seems to be aromatically a young wine, but looking at it, possibly could have some bottle age. It's really neat. So it's showing complexity. And I'll tell you, the palate immediately reflects all of the things that I noticed on the nose, but with more power. Actually, the density and concentration of this wine is surprisingly neat. So what am I picking up on the palate? Both red and black fruit, but dominantly red again, a little more dried than fresh, but there's some ripe red plum in there. There's the dried floral. There's a saltiness to this wine that's neat, like capers or olives. There's definitely dried herbs, and take your pick. Nothing really dominant like rosemary. That's why I mentioned oregano, that sort of gets along with all the children. And that little red licorice thing is on the palate as well. It has distinctive both organic and inorganic minerality, but there's the dust. There's also just a hint of what the French call animal. So I don't know if it's a kiss of Brettanomyces, but if it is, it's barely enough to pull my attention, just to give it complexity. And maybe a little bit of balsamico, which could be just balsamico, that wonderful range of fragrances that you described so well, Evan. Or it could be a touch of VA, but not enough to be a flaw. It looks quite pale to Bill. You can definitely see through it, but it's not, I can't read through it easily. I'd have to really strain. So I'm going to go back to get one more approach. Mid palate, fantastic dried and fresh red fruit with a kiss of black. Oh, I didn't mention structure. My bad. Acidity level, I would say medium plus, verging on high. Tannin, medium plus, verging on high, but really qualify the tannins. They are pretty fine grained. They're not harsh or mean. They're not shutting down the flavor of the wine. Kevin is asking a touch of caramel. I think so, and I think that could be the result of possibly some barrel aging or ripeness. And if there is wood on this wine, it is mixed and probably what we call officially blended. Alcohol, medium plus, verging on high, but it belongs. It gives the wine density. This speaks, frankly, really high quality fruit, possibly older vines. That the expression on the palate is significant. So what are we considering? Grenache blend, Pinot Noir, Sangiovese blend from Italy, Spain, Australia, or New Zealand. So Grenache, thin-skinned grape variety that is very much influenced with anything that's blended with it, notably Shiraz, or Mourvedre, and that can incarnate in Australia, right? As well as southern
Garnacha.
France, and in Spain, Garnacha, which, the Spanish probably correctly claimed that they started the Garnacha Grenache phenomena before it went over the Pyrenees to France. Pinot, I think the tannins, probably for me, a little bit too drying, but certainly the acidity speaks to Pinot. But I think the aromatics also, and I'm sorry to lead you a little, but I don't often in Pinot will get as much dried fruit and dried flowers. But certainly I'll get both organic and inorganic earth elements. And Sangiovese blend, sometimes Sangiovese is a one-note wonder in Italy, depending on what township it comes from, and sometimes it's blended with both native and international varieties. So that said, how our people are really, our friends tonight are really participating on the polls, I think. At least they have been. Yes?
Yes, definitely. I do think that the first red wine is always a little tougher, doing the switch over. But again, the polls are anonymous. So, and I do see an other being clicked on. So the brave soul who put other, let us know what else you were thinking. What else would you have liked to see on this grape variety chart?
I will say, on the structure, this is always a tell for me on this particular wine. This beautiful balance between elevated acidity and elevated tannins, almost equal. And the tannins being not super soft, but finely grained, just lots of them. The finish is long, and it makes me want to eat. This is a wine that is looking for protein, salt, or fat to soften it a little bit.
So here are the results. We have 63% on Sangiovese, 32% on Grenache. And then in terms of region, kind of goes along with it, 63% on Italy, 32% on Spain, almost 100% in the Old World.
And I take credit for, nobody voting for Pinot because I scared you out of it. I'm sorry about that. But I will also say what's really interesting to me, a significant number of people going Grenache Garnacha. The one thing, I know what the wine is, but the one thing I'm contemplating that's a classic tell for me on Grenache, which doesn't necessarily mean it's in there in every wine that it's Grenache dominant, is it usually has sort of overt pepper, either white or black, and also maybe a little bit of a lighter color if it's not a blend. So we're getting on our plane. Where were we?
Maddie, sorry, one thing as we're going. Can you talk about why it wouldn't be a Nebbiolo?
What the whole back and forth between Nebbiolo and Sangiovese is time honored, and I think will go on for eternity. And I think actually we're going to throw other grape varieties in there, like Etna Rosso and Xinomato. But I think Nebbiolo would have a stronger expression of florality, flowers. I think that the tannins would just be a little more elevated in the acidity and be like grumpy, mean. And often,
I was going to say mean.
Depending on, if it's Barolo, it'll actually shut the flavor down. If it's a Longa Nebbiolo, different. We are in Tuscany. We are Col d'Orcia. It's actually not Brunello. It's just showing it as Brunello, but it is Montalcino. It is the Rosso di Montalcino. You do get a little bit of maritime influence. Aren't these Google Earth images killer? I'm completely addicted to them because they show us elevation, and I have mastered the world to thank for that. Right, rivers, the hillsides, and there we are in glorious Tuscany with hillside sites. Somebody's mentioning leather in the Nebbiolo. I think leather can incarnate in both Nebbiolo, and Sangiovese. It depends, but to me, the thing is the florality and the quality of the tannin. This is from a large producer that is entirely organic and owned by the Cinzano family that obviously have plenty of resources. Rosso is often referred to as baby Brunello or young vine Brunello, which really depends on the producer. There's no law dictating that, but these folks, and Col d'Orcia, you pronounce the C as cha because it's followed by a consonant. I think that's how it works, which means the hill overlooking the Orcia River, because Col is the hill and Orcia is the river. They like to bottle their Rosso di Montalcino a year after harvest, and they put it in neutral Slavonian oak casks. So it's not getting new oak, and sometimes Brunello can. It is the clone of Sangiovese called Brunello that was identified and heralded in the 1860s by Clemente Santi at Biondi Santi. And he proceeded to call Sangiovese Grosso Brunello because of the color of the grape and the thickness of the skin. This is 100% Brunello. They don't speak, the owners of the estate don't speak to the age of the vines for their Rosso, but it probably is younger vines. You have significant altitude here, but not super high, like 250 meters. So we're talking what is that times 3? So you're going over 700 feet above sea level, which is another reason why you get maritime influence. I think it's a great example of a rich Rosso di Montalcino, because sometimes people think that Rosso is a lot lighter than Brunello. This is surprising, Evan. What's the price point on this wine? I bet it's
$28 right at the bottom there. Yeah.
So
it's a steal.
So Maddie, we've got some questions here, and I'm going to combine two into one. One person asked, so you said 100% Sangiovese in this particular?
But the clone is called Brunello. So
Great.
it's not blended, whereas in Chianti, you can have other allowable grape varieties. And but chances are they're using younger vines or even barrel selections when they do their harvest and then assess the wine.
Right.
The more concentrated wine will go into the appellation Brunello, and the lighter, more forward expressions will be called Rosso.
So it's not only 100% Sangiovese,
Mhm.
it's 100% Brunello clone
Mhm.
of Sangiovese. And then
Correct.
another question here is,
And
Bill's
also,
asking that
mhm.
Bill's also asking that is Brunello di Montalcino, is it not always 100% Sangiovese?
It's 100% Sangiovese. If it's not, it's news to me. So Brunello is Sangiovese. It's a clone of Sangiovese. So the Rosso di Montalcino and the Brunello will both be 100% Brunello clone of Sangiovese. Sorry if I came across confusing. I apologize. This is a large producer, but entirely organic. They call themselves the Organic Island in Montalcino. And I want to read one thing, Evan, before I invite you to comment. By the way, the mouthfeel is spectacular. This is Sangiovese to me. Persistent acidity and tannin, mouth-watering. And somebody mentioned dried and sour cherries. Absolutely. You are bang on the money, Deepu. Bravo. And that combination with exotic spice, which I really didn't mention, like cardamom and such, the dusty earth, and the dried flowers. Regarding climate change, Col Dorcia's wine team has made a comment because it's very much at their forefront and how the heat is affecting the alcohol levels. And they said in the old days, they had 10.5 to 11% all the time. Starting in 1970, they started having 12.5 to 13, and now they routinely have 13.5 to 15. And they think it's, they worry about it. So what they work towards in terms of solutions, a little more production per plant. They don't defoliate, remove the leaves, and they tend to pick a little bit earlier. So they're very thoughtful and cognizant of heat. Do you like this wine, Evan? I think it's a gorgeous
No, very much. And
example.
I like a comment that you made earlier, which I think is really instructive to everybody, that when you get that combination of bright acid, finely grained tannins, that fruit thing, it really speaks to Sangiovese. And I think that to go back to what was being asked earlier, both can have leathering, and I find there's a leatheriness to this wine as well too. But Nebbiolo is just going to have meaner tannin. I mean, it's just the way it is. Now, certain Brunellos can have big, massive tannins, but Chianti, most anything else, with the exception of the Cabernet-based wines that come towards to the coast in Maremma and Bulgaria and stuff like that, are all going to have this sort of finesse of tannins, this fineness, always with that bright acid and that sort of medium structure.
And that balance between acid and tannin, that to me, add the dried cherry to that and the dusty earth is the tell for
But you don't get that
Sangiovese.
balance. You don't get that balance in Piedmont. Not the
No,
same.
you
One
don't.
usually overshoots the other. So
The
okay,
tannin pulls away, right?
pulls away like a horse. All right, let's move on to the next wine. Wine number 4. Gonna pick up a little bit of time here because I want to spend some time at the end. I have a surprise. We'll talk about it at the end. So until then, let's go through there. You can read the questions as I'm talking about them. But if you look at the wine, like Madeline's wine, it's got deep. I can still see my fingers through it a little bit underneath the thing. Wouldn't call it opaque, but I put it somewhere in the darker, more concentrated color. Once again, it is a ruby, but unlike Madeline's wine that was showing a little bit more yellowing and garneting towards the edge, Sangiovese does drop color quickly. This wine is more pinkish, which does suggest maybe a little bit of youth. It is, I think, dropping a little color too, but not at the same accelerated rate. I swirl it around, and I actually have tears going down here. My first one I remember was sheeting. This one's tearing, although they're moving at a reasonable clip. Moderate level of glycerol, moderate alcohol, some development of color, but still a relatively young wine. So again, darker colors suggest more concentration, more volume of texture, personality, etc. I'm not getting a lot of oak on this one right off the bat, so I'm going to answer my question, but I won't know tannin until later. So let's smell it. What do we get fruit-wise? Well, we're getting a lot of fruit. We're getting, once again, a lot of red fruit. And I would call it raspberry. I would call it strawberry. I would call it, maybe even a little bit of cranberry, and definitely some more savory plum elements there. There is some dark fruit there, kind of in that black raspberry, black cherry vein. And then I'm getting a whole bunch of other stuff that's sort of greenish. I mean, it's gross, so I put it in the fruit category, but it's not. I'm getting fennel. I'm getting like licorice. Then I'm getting like a little bit of green peppercorn. Then I'm getting a little bit of like jerky, like dried meat or something. Then I'm getting a little bit of pepper, getting a little bit of dried saucisson sec,
What's that? Sausage.
saucisson like dried sausage, and then I'm getting this sort of a whole herbal profile that's kind of like a little bit of rosemary, maybe some of that same oregano you talked about earlier, maybe a little bit of thyme, maybe a little bit of sage, then some florals, particularly lavendery kind of floral, maybe a kiss of violet, but all that sort of hodgepodge of things going on there. And it's not sort of a fruit bomb at all. The fruit that's there is like a dusty character of fruit, this herbal character underneath there. No oak what to speak of strongly, but if there oak, I suspect there is oak there, but it's probably more as a holding vessel and some moderate oxygenation across there. Let's go ahead and give it a taste. Mm. Interesting. There's a real succulence to the fruit on the attack, very sort of juicy character to it, and it is sort of very red fruited. It is got a lot of pronounced fruit, almost sort of like a very ripe, almost maybe a softly baked character of fruit, but it's also bone frickin' dry wine. So you're getting a ripeness, but it's a dry ripeness. There is a roundness to it. There's a textural, almost creamy is not the right word, but a roundness. There's a smoothness to it. Although there's a little bit of tannin in the back that kind of kicks you on the back of your teeth as it's going down. It's round, but there's also sort of a lean backbone to it. It is dry. I'd say the alcohol volume is medium plus, pushing high. My chest is a bit warm. The acid is in balance. I would say it's medium plus, if any direction, leaning maybe a little bit more medium than high. And it's smooth and it's really tasty. It's just a very delicious wine.
It's delicious.
Yeah. and it shows very much a style, easy to drink, absolutely. And I think that's part of personality of both where it's from, where we'll learn about later, and the overall genre of grapes and pedigree of grapes that are associated with that part of the world. So what could we have here? Could we be a Zinfandel? Big, rich, rustic, occasionally jammy by nature too, usually very sharp in acid oftentimes, although they can be made in a confected way. Could it be Grenache or Grenache blend? And by the way, just as a reiteration, anytime we put blend there, that means it could be 100% Grenache, but it could also be Grenache blended with other grapes there. Malbec, pure or Malbec blended with other grapes there. And then, of course, other. And then your associations, of course, France and Spain could both go with the Grenache or the Garnacha. Argentina would, of course, be the Malbecian element of it. There's not much Grenache in Argentina. There's some really good Grenache in the far north of Argentina, I might add, though, up in the Humahuaca, Jujuy area, Salta area. Could be California. You could have anything from California, and it could be other. But I want you to pay attention to the nature of the fruit, the expression of the fruit, that sort of underbrushy character we talked about before, that sort of herbal. There is sort of almost like a potting soilish, turned earth gardening kind of thing, like Maddie on her lawnmower, driving around the garden kind of thing there to do that, but not necessarily as stony and earthy and rocky. There is a nice acidity character there, but it's not shrill. It's not that sort of biting acid that Madeline had in her wine, which suggests to me probably a slightly warmer climate, even though there is acid.
Yeah. I feel the toughness of this wine in the results that are coming out. We've got 40% on Grenache, 47% on Malbec, and 13% on Zin.
Yep.
And then in terms of New World and Old World, we do see people leaning towards the New World with 60% new and 40% old. So any comment, Evan, as we go into the reveal?
Yeah, I guess I want to circle our friends in Malbec land, which obviously skews the New World element as well too, and tell you that it's not, it doesn't, Malbec is really driven a lot by its color. I mean, you can really tell it by its color. It's usually vibrant and it's purpley and it smells purpley and it tastes purpley, and all that's got, you can have beautiful red fruits and stuff depending on where it is, but there's not enough of that extraction, the blue fruit, the yogurty character that you can often get, the violets that really define the wine. There's fruit, they're floral here, but the floral is more lavender, which is sort of more of a dusty, dark Provençal type character. So if you subtract that element there, and it's just not weighty enough for Zinfandel to do that. So that kind of leaves me in the land of Grenache. So where I'm going, I'm landing, I'm going over and I'm leaving Italy. I'm staying in the, so interesting. Again, think about how Evan also patterns these things. Remember what your choices were last time. Everybody thought the reason they thought it was the Hunter Valley Semillon. A lot of people thought that a lot of people got Italy, but Garnacha was a choice there. And this is a Grenache wine. So we are in France. We are in southern France, and we are specifically in the southern Rhone Valley. And we are in an area down at the bottom of the hill in Gigondas, in the southern Rhone, in the so-called Bouches de Rhône area, in an area that I love, that makes some superb wines. And what you're getting here, again, and to answer your question about what makes this one more French versus Spanish, is that garrigue thing, is that lavender, herbal floral, fresh green herbs, dustiness, underbrush thing that you simply don't find with Grenache there. You get a stoniness, you can get a minerality more in Grenache that comes out of there, and sort of an overall more alcoholic richness there that you're not finding here. This one to me is like quintessentially Grenache rather than Garnacha there. But what's interesting, remember I talked a little bit about that Seigneur before, you do have about 20% Syrah. So this particular wine, and Gigondas, for many of you know, you're studying hard, was the first of the Côte du Rhône village that got promoted to Cru back in 1971. Wines are Grenache driven by law. They have to be at least 51% Grenache, but then you can add in some other stuff. But most Gigondas is going to be primarily Grenache driven. And there you are. You're near a couple of other great appellations, most notably Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which has a lot of stuffing, but literally you're abutting the area of Vaqueras. You're not too far from Sablé. You're not too far from Lirac, and a number of other things. And this is a property called Domaine du Terme. Terme is short for terminus. Terminus would mean like the end, and this literally sits at the bottom of the hill in the so-called cone of Gigondas, literally borders the back of the property. You're in Vaqueras. So you're literally at the terminus, you're at the end of Gigondas there, and behind the winery there, literally you're in Vaqueras. In front of the winery, you're in Gigondas. So it actually sits on the border. This is a particular property owned by the fabulous Anne-Marie Godin, who is the winemaker owner. Her father, Roland, started the winery. It's got some 40 plus years of age on it. Her dad is the mayor of Gigondas. Isn't that cool? So if anything goes wrong and they want to change the laws, I guess they could do that, right? But it's a terrific property, and they make lovely, lovely wine, very old school and all that. By the way, you know how many people actually live in Gigondas? Just kicks and giggles. 500 people. Everybody works there. Nobody's from there. There's like a post office, 2 wine bars, a cafe, a couple of tasting rooms, and a fabulous Michelin-starred restaurant.
They just drive across the river to someplace else.
Yeah, that's about it. So you go there. But I think what's interesting here, and if you're exploring Gigondas, you should think about is Gigondas is sort of, as you go up the hill, it goes from the sort of flatland area, which they call the cone, which moves gradually up there to the sort of midland area. And then you move up to the Dentelle, up towards the mountains here. I like the wines coming from the flats because I think Grenache particularly prospers here, as does the Mourvèdre, I might add. And they have a little bit greater concentration of limestone in the soil, so you get a little bit more brightness to the fruit, a little bit more lift to the fruit. And again, I think that also helps carry that garrigue character further. But the Godins have been doing a wonderful job for a long period of time. Their wines perennially score high. They do well, and I find them to be very quintessentially Gigondas. However, for their money, their Vaqueras is one of the best wines made in the southern Rhone
We got
Valley.
2 questions we have to answer.
Shoot.
Why not Gamay is number 1. And then I think as you were talking about why not Gamay, because there was some confusion between Grenache and Malbec. I think you kind of answered that Malbec thing with the lavender violet spot.
Yeah, Malbec's going to have more extract of color, more extract of personality. Grenache is a gentler grape than Malbec is, even when Malbec is vinified as sort of a gluey, easy drinking wine. Um, why not Gamay? Gamay would have a much sharper level of acid. Gamay is a cooler climate, higher acid grape. Grenache needs temperature to warm up. Gamay would have a much more vibrant, almost magenta-like color.
And
This
see-through.
wine, yeah, would see through. Grenache it's not as lacking in color as Pinot Noir, but it's not a heavily extracted wine, and it drops color very quickly. A Gamay would give you more of that sort of really ripe strawberry, ripe zingy raspberry fraise de bois character. Grenache doesn't give that to you. It gives you a nice round, rich character, but it doesn't have that acid in the back to just kind of lift everything. Plus, you have no carbonic maceration, right? So you're not going to get that. This wine does have 20% stocks, usually for the Syrah part of it, but it's not going to do that. It's just sort of round and creamy.
Evan, what's in this besides Grenache?
80% Grenache, 20% Syrah.
But that 20% Syrah makes a big difference in terms of color and
90% D-stem, 10% stems, obviously with the Syrah.
So, Evan, the other question is, how would you tell between French and Spanish Grenache versus Grenache?
Yeah, I think it would be twofold. One, it's that Garrigui thing that I said before. Two, the Syrah that you've got blended into it is giving you a little bit more of that peppery sort of character. I don't find garnachas from Spain to have a lot of sort of that same peppery, meaty kind of thing that you're going to find in the Southern Rhone, either because Grenache can give that to you on its own, as Madeline mentioned when she was talking about it a little bit earlier, but two, because oftentimes there is a Syrah or Mourvèdre component to it. Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, GSM. Those are going to give you a more peppery green peppercorn, black peppercorn character than you're ever going to find in Spain. Spain will generally give you more kind of high tone minerality also, I think, which you find in Aragon and places like that, that you just don't find that in the same earthy manifested way in southern France. All right, Madeline, I'm going to make sure we got enough time for both wines. And then I got my surprise at the end.
Yay, a surprise. My takeaway is really delicious, by the way. Southern Rhone blend, that primal red fruit, elevated tannins, pepper, and it does speak to a blend, not a monovarietal. And Malbec will just be prettier, more floral on the nose, just adding my 10 cents. And more opaque, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what am I doing? Wine number 5, yay. So we've all gotten, color is my best friend. And by the way, if you're in a blind tasting exam, and you get stuck when you hit the initial conclusion, my little gift is take a breath and go back to the color and go back to the structure, and it will often set you free. Because some stuff doesn't look like other stuff, right? Boy, that's really scientific, Madeline. So in terms of the appearance of this is pretty much opaque in terms of the middle color, which is a very dark ruby, and it lightens to a pink or a light ruby on the rim that still has a little blue in the color. So it is mono hue. It hasn't started any gradation, and which speaks to a young wine. The density speaks to a thick-skinned grape variety or varieties. And if I move it gently in the glass, it is absolutely staining the glass. So it is probably not a larger thin-skinned grape variety, which is one of the reasons why I mentioned going back to the color if you have a brain freeze. In terms of the question we're considering, and we've been talking about this throughout, the whole red, blue, and black fruit. And you will notice, blue doesn't get its fair share of attention, but when blueberry manifests, it does. Malbec often has it, by the way. And then characterizing the fruit. Remember, like we characterize the flowers as fresh or dried or a combination. Fruit can be almost ripe, just right, perfectly ripe, overripe, or jammy/cooked. And consider savory spice. And this isn't just in red wine, but what is one of the classic tells for Gruner Veltliner is a combination of radish, right? White pepper and such. So savory spice will often be a little bit of a thumbprint for a specific grape variety. So we've determined that this has a deep color. It appears to be young from thicker skinned grape variety or varieties. It is moving thickly and slowly, which also speaks to a healthy alcohol level. And aromatically, it is very forthcoming. And I immediately get a combination of red and black fruit that is perfectly ripe, verging on overripe and jammy, because I get a wave of alcohol as well. I'm just checking the alcohol on this. Often the number doesn't equate to how the wine is showing. I love this word, sorry, I'm going to throw it out, organoleptically, meaning what your senses will perceive. I had to practice to say that because it's a tongue twister. So we have ripe verging on jammy fruit, a combination of super ripe red plums and currants, and then black plums and black currants. And then in terms of a floral presence, it's, dark flowers, take your pick, lavender and violets, and they come off fresh to me. I think there's a little bit of a fennel anise smell to this wine. There's some herbs, but it's sort of a background garrigue Provençal dried herb element. But the two things that are coming up and pushing their way ahead of other fragrances are pepper spice. Take your pick, white or black. I perceive both, maybe even green peppercorn, and also a meatiness to this wine. There's a dear friend of mine who refers to it as the Jimmy Dean smell. And as a career vegetarian who will occasionally take a bite of something and 2 bites of lamb, I like the Jimmy Dean association, though I've never had a sandwich that, will reflect that. And it smells like smoked meat to me, but not enough to command the attention away from that beautiful, ripe red fruit. I'm going to go ahead and taste it.
I've never heard this descriptor, a blueberry dry erase marker.
Oh my. Kevin is positively poetic with a soupçon of iron. So we've got blue fruit. I don't know what a race marker is, but that speaks to chalkiness, right? And iron, which is earth as well. Good job, Kevin. So I was paying such close attention to that I wasn't paying attention to my palate.
You're quite sorry.
I was completely entertained. So this is very interesting. The attack, there's the ripe fruit. Structurally, actually medium plus acidity. Tannins, medium plus, let's qualify them. I will call them, they're drying, but not harsh or astringent. So they're not soft. Alcohol is moderate plus as well, but it's pulling my attention, verging on high. And actually, remember how the Semillon, to pivot back to that white number 2, had both compelling acidity and was waxy and rich on the palate as well? This is doing the same thing. It's got an edgy structure, but when you hold it on your palate, there's a roundness and a smoothness to it. You will notice I have not mentioned much in the way of earth. I think there is a little bit of turned earth, like we're out in the garden digging around, getting rid of the weeds. Maybe a hint of inorganic earth, but I'm fighting for it. So for me, this is fruit dominant with savory spice and a little bit of animal, meat, smoke. Oak, interestingly, is so perfectly blended in here that I'm going to call it blended oak. I mean, if there is new oak, it doesn't command your attention. And if you are wondering, earth versus no earth, start playing with the aroma of this next 2 wines, number 3 and 4. So what are our options? Dolcetto, Malbec rears its head again. Syrah, Italy, France, Argentina, Canada, others. So Dolcetto is historically or classically higher in tannin, softer in acidity, with a nice firm dark color. Sometimes it'll come across easier if people have used whole cluster. Malbec can have this kind of density, even more actually, and often has a strong florality and tannins that will be like this, medium plus, but smooth. And then Syrah will have a little bit of both of the other grape varieties, concentration of color, firm acidity and tannin, depending on where it's grown and how warm the climate is. It often will show a savory element. So you have options of Italy for Dolcetto. You have really Malbec. Let's figure Argentina. There's not enough of it in France to worry about. Syrah, you could do Rhone Valley, north or south, or you could do someplace in the New World. And Canada, take your pick, because they grow Syrah with great success in British Columbia, as well as Bordelais varietals.
So I'm going to end the poll and launch the results, share the results, but there's a question, why not Corvina? We've got 2 votes for Corvina.
Oh, that's a fantastic option. Thank you for bringing it up. Corvina, if it's incarnating in Valpolicella or Amarone, will often have more of a dried fruit element to it, and a raisinated element, which I don't get in this wine. Admittedly, a Valpolicella expression will be fresher, and Amarone will have more of the dried fruit. So no, it could be that, absolutely. So we have a strong vote for Malbec. I mean, Malbec is trying to make its presence known in
ever since it's been in the choices. They were like, no, Evan's got to put one in, right?
But you know what? We're not that smart, so we don't do well. Evan's smarter than I am, but let's go ahead and reveal it. We are going on our slow, comfortable flight away from the Southern Rhone. We are leaving France. We're actually, I will tell you, leaving Europe. Remember that expression of organic or inorganic character? I just don't find present in this wine. This wine to me is more about ripe red and black fruit, pepper, and meat. We are going to North America. We are not going to California, Oregon, or Washington State. We are going to, drumroll, Canada. We are going to British Columbia, the Okanagan Valley, which, evidently produces over 80% of British Columbia's wine. And it's a long river valley, and we are in the southern end of it, in a township called Oliver. And you'll notice how the vineyards actually slope up on either side of the river. You are at almost the 50th parallel, which is I think Champagne's 49 or 50. You are north, one of the northernmost growing regions in the world. But you also have a spectacular sunshine. You actually have a warm climate with massive diurnal shifts, which we also know that all grape varieties love, whether you're, now we know, Okanagan Valley, or you're in Mendoza, or you're in Paso Robles. So preserving those nighttime temperatures, preserving acidity levels, and you are Syrah. So this is an area of the world that Evan has visited. I have not, though I will tell you, I routinely wave to Windsor, aka Ontario, because Detroit's right across the river, facing south into Canada, but they don't seem to have a strong interest into bringing Ontario wines into Metro Detroit. This is a comer region in terms of a place to absolutely pay attention to. And they are at the moment known more for Bordelais varieties, but Syrah is on a vertical climb. And if this wine is any indication at all, it's in the glass. This is owned and operated by Michael Mosley and his wife, who are passionate about classical music. And to quote Michael, every wine I have made in my life was exposed to classical music in the cellar or the vineyard. Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Puccini, Verdi. And he believes that that music has a huge and positive effect on vines. And actually, they came from Slovakia, where their winery was located near a village where Beethoven visited often, and allegedly where he composed for Elise. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
This wine has seen 10 months in a combo of Slovakian American and French oak. I bet money not much of it is new. And I have to pivot for a moment to these are people who like to play music and eat at the same time, because they are recommending dry rub ribs, eggplant parmigiana, braised short ribs, and hard cheeses like Comté. You know, if nothing else, don't worry about, oh my God, am I going to have to identify as Canada? And somebody's saying it, you read my mind, versus Washington. And there's Michael and his wife, Martina. If you can get New World varietal recognition, Syrah, high quality, fully ripe out of this, yay. Would you agree with that, Evan? And there is a Scotia Viognier in this,
Yeah,
like
and
pushing
I
10%.
yeah, these are not testable wines. I just is in
No.
the adage of trying to show you something that it is its own way is becoming a quote unquote benchmark, if you will. That proliferation of really high quality Syrah in the Okanagan is something to watch out for. It's the
Really
grape
good.
I'm finding in my visits up there from a red standpoint is the grape to watch. Madeline mentioned that yes, they're known for Cabernet and other Bordelais varieties too, but the Syrahs of what have wowed me, not only in the Okanagan, but even in places like Vancouver Island and other areas of Simcoe and stuff like that. They're doing a great job. Look for Canadian wines. There's not a lot of them out there. Hopefully there's going to be more. But there's a particular importer here who does called Cascadia Wines, who actually makes has a great portfolio, including winemakers cut there, and you can buy her wines online. VJ, she's amazing, and buy her wines. So yeah,
Oh,
look out for
I
this.
like this reference to Bionic Frog, Evan,
I don't
from
know the Bionic Frog.
Cayuse.
Who's the
Oh, that's a
Bionic
Bionic
Frog?
Frog is Cayuse. That's Christophe Baron. I'm sure he would be. Well, Christophe doesn't like any comparatives, but I'm sure Michael would be appreciative. That comes from the rocks of Milton Freewater in the Oregon side of Walla Walla, and is considered as close to the Rhone Valley about as we get in the New World. Very strong personality wines, very identifiable terroir. So yeah, this has that same sort of strength of Rotundan and pepper and meat and all that with this wonderful ripeness, great structure. And I need to move on to the last wine because I'm not going to be able to get to my surprise.
And I'm just going to say to Scott, don't worry, I have your question down. We'll answer it in the happy half hour.
Yeah, so our last wine is another deep dark wine. Probably sitting here going, "This has got to be the Malbec, Evan, right?" You know, haven't had it yet, so give it a look. It's pretty opaque. It does have a very sort of magenta color to the rim there. A lot of extract, fairly youthful in appearance. As I rotate my glass around, I've got a good volume of color there. So that's an interesting thing as I swirl it. Moderate plus legs there, but there's definitely some extraction of color, of volume. Clearly a thicker pigmented grape. We're not that quickly, so let's go ahead and smell it and taste it and all of that. So what am I getting here? Getting a lot of dark fruit. I am getting a tremendous amount of red fruit and black fruit. I'm getting blue fruit too. I might add some black cherry, some blueberry, some red berry, some plum. Once again, I'm getting a little bit of sort of a fennel and a black licorice character here. Strong violets, a little bit of lavender, and greens. Greens in the form of like tea leaves, greens in the form of tobacco leaf, along with that color, and then sort of a rockiness, a graphite character, a strong sense of personality, and then a little bit of oak. And the oak is nice and deftly laid over here. I'm getting a dark chocolate character, a high, for those people who like your chocolate, high cacao percentage, like in the 80s to 90s sort of thing. And a little bit of star anise, maybe a little bit of espresso or coffee bean there. And rich is a nice, tight, compact package with a tremendous amount of things going on, which suggests to me right off the bat, for nothing else, that it's probably not a single grape. It comes off to me as a concerto rather than a soloist going on here. Is the oak a factor here? Probably. Cooler, warmer climate? Hard to say, because it's got shrill, it's got acid, as we're going to see in a minute, but it's got dark color and pigment. So hold the vote on that, and let's taste. The wine has got attack. It has dark fruit, but it has some nice savory components as well. There is a rockiness of soil. There is a dare I said, like a graphite character once again, pencil lead character. It also has nice attack, rich in mouth coating, some alcohol there. I feel it in my chest. And the tannins are a bit gritty. which is probably in part a lot due to both the style of the winemaking and the variety itself. And the acidity is quite linear and quite strong. The wine has a leanness to it, which I think is both probably area located, vineyard located, grape variety located, and it also comes off to me as a wine that is incredibly young, both in terms of the visuals, but also the structure, the expression of the fruit, the nature of how the tannins still need a little bit more time, the acidity being bright, and things just coming into their own. So what do we got here? Cabernet Sauvignon as part of a blend. Touriga Nacional as part of a blend. Syrah as part of a blend. Evan, would you do that? 2 Syrahs in a row? Maybe.
He's capable of anything.
Maybe.
Right?
And then, of course, other. What are our choices here? Portugal, which
Where's
of course,
the Malbec?
Yeah. See, I didn't do that to you. We've got Portugal, which would be the Touriga. France could be, of course, the Cabernet Sauvignon, or again, our friend Syrah. California could be any of the above. Argentina probably would be Syrah, particularly if you were in the central part of the Cujo area, most notably in San Juan and places like Pedernal. But it could also be Cabernet Sauvignon, does well in many parts of Mendoza and even far north in Salta. So you've got a lot of interesting choices there. Think about, stop back, forget there, focus on structure for a minute. That's one of the things that Tim always teaches us that's so important. We get so obsessed with flavors and things like that. Think about what the structure is giving you there, because oftentimes structure doesn't lie. And I think that will be helpful in you finding where you want to be. And let's vote early, vote often, right?
Okay, I think that it may be the last wine, but it is pretty confusing for folks here because Malbec wasn't an option. So now everyone's thrown.
It doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be Malbec.
So 47% on Cabernet, 35% on Touriga, and 18% on Syrah. I'd say that's pretty all over the board. And in terms of old world versus new world, it's almost 50-50. We've got Portugal and France, and then California and Argentina kind of on equal-ish footing. I've got some other here, so I'm not sure what other it's supposed to represent.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about it for a minute. As a style of wine, this is very much it carries a little bit of both the old world and the new world in it. I think there's some old world sensibilities to the structure. The cooler, a tip of the hat or the beret, if you will, to a cooler climate area that gives you that structure, which is going to lean out some of those tannins and all that, and also focus on putting the earthier character further forward, that sort of graphite tobacco leaf thing that we talked about before, which a lot of people would associate more as an old world thing, although I think it's also part and parcel of the variety. To that point, no, Evan wouldn't give you Syrah that many times in a row, and it doesn't come off that way. So you're probably right to stick there. Touriga is going to give you a much more, it does have that color. That's a good call. That's a good call. It's one of the reasons I put it there. But it also has a more savory thing. It doesn't necessarily have the same leafiness, although one could get caught between Douro and Bordeaux, particularly, and some Cabernet styles. So if you ended up there and you were wrong, don't feel bad. But if you did end up in the world as we're leaving Canada, oh, Canada, and we're heading over, we are actually going to leave the hemisphere. So we are going to get on the plane, and we're going to go way down south, and we're actually going to go to Argentina. So if you were in the New World and you were picking up some of the sort of manifestation of that ripeness and precision of fruit, you're correct there. It is, however, Cabernet based. And I think one of the things that people forget is that they make a lot of really darn good Cabernet in Argentina too. We tend to think of them as a one-trick pony in Malbec, but shame on us for thinking about it. Actually, long before Malbec was happening, there was more Cabernet in Argentina.
Argentine Cabernet is hiding in plain sight.
Yep. Yeah, and if you think about going where the grapes came from, they came from the other side of the Andes and were brought over from Chile, and all of those grapes originally came from Bordeaux, and that is Bordelais sort of area. So yes, Malbec is that grape too, but Cabernet has always been a strong variety. So this comes from Bodega Tejo, which makes the Zaha brand, which this wine is a part of. And it's in the Uco Valley of Argentina in the area of Mendoza. So you're not in Mendoza City, you're not in Luján de Cuyo, which are closer, further inland away from the Andes Mountains and lower in altitude. So you generally do get a lot of Cabernet there, and the Cabernet can be quite ripe and quite delicious and rounder. In the Uco Valley, where the altitudes range between about 3,000 feet and almost 5,000 feet, it's cooler. When you got high altitude, right, you're going to get a different whole ultraviolet thing. So you get in colors that have incredible intensity, which is what you are literally seeing here. But this wine has it's 85% Cabernet, but you've got 12% Cab Franc and you've got 3% Petit Verdot. So it does very much has a Bordeaux blend style. It is a single vineyard in coming from the Toco vineyard. Zaha itself simply means the word heart in the native Huarpe language from which it's taken. And it comes from an area called the Paraje Altamira, which you can see on the label. Altamira is one of the hot spots, not literally hot, actually cool, but very happening areas in the Uco Valley. It sits in the area of La Consulta in the southern part of the valley. That is a classic Argentine Uco Valley.
We're talking about nosebleed altitude here, right?
Yeah. And again, grapes don't have the ability to put on sunscreen, right? So they make thicker skins instead, which gives you those deep, rich pigmentations. So again, if you were in the Douro Valley and you're particularly high towards the Douro Superior, not the same level of height. You get hot, you get exposure, you get deep, dark pigmentations. A deft amount of oak here. I applaud Jeff and Colo, Jeff Mosbach and Colo Alejandro Sejanovic make this wine. I actually believe maybe Jeff is on the call today, so maybe he can join us in the happy half hour. Ale Durago, who sources the wines from down there, I know is on the call too, and they do just a tremendous job as a team. About 14 months of oak, roughly 40% of it new, all French and good stuff, and very Cabernet, and on there to show you, to remind people that you should think about things other than that. There are increasingly good Cabernets, and I think all of the people who are third-party critics there are finally being able to recognize the quality of the Cabernet, which is superb there.
Evan, one question about the Cabernet from Argentina. Green notes, someone said not getting that bell pepper, green note type of thing going.
Yeah, I mean, you do get a little bit of, part of Cabernet Sauvignon's parentage is Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc is a cooler, leafier variety. And on top of that, you've got Cabernet Franc in the blend too. So you've got the Cabernet pyrrhizinic side of the Cabernet varietal echoing by the Cabernet Franc there. So of course you're going to get some greenness. But what you get here is ripeness too. So it is not bell pepper. It is not jalapeno pepper. It is leaning into the sort of herbal but not herbaceous element of that. And I actually think that's a good thing. I think one of the problems we have with, dare I say, without sounding too judgmental, Botoxed Cabernet coming out of Northern California is it's all big fruit, big extract, big oak. And you forget that one of the paramount DNA components of Cabernet Sauvignon is pyrazine. So there's Alejandro Colo, we call him because he's a redhead. On the left-hand side, Jeff Mosbach, who's American, been living in Argentina for a long, long period of time. Both are former veterans from Cadena and have worked there for a long time before they set off on their own. And I think one of the other things that I love about this particular parcel in Toco is it does have limestone there, and you get that in the acidity, so it really pops it as well too.
It's
just
Cabernet.
A brilliant wine. It's really Cab. Good. It's Cab.
And we're very blessed that Jeff is on the line. And so if you guys are able to stay for the happy half hour, we're going to be here for the next 25 minutes or so.
From live and in living color from Mendoza, or Jeff, maybe you're up north in Salta, I don't know, but Jeff is the winemaker and a dear friend of Madeline's and mine, who's the man behind those wines, along with Colo and Ale, who sort of is the orchestrator pulling these together, making sure we can get these wines in the United States. First off, the wine showed exceptionally well and beautifully well. And it might be wonderful for all of our listeners out here, all of our MTW fans, to learn a little bit more. Tell me everything, in the words of Rachel Maddow, what did I get wrong, right? And more importantly, what else can you tell us about that vineyard? And more about Cabernet in Mendoza and Cabernet in Argentina, because I think for a lot of people, it's new.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Evan, Madeline. It's great to see you again. Li Meng, thank you guys so much for including one of our wines in this wonderful, wonderful tasting experience that you guys have been doing over the last couple of years. I love the opportunity not only to have one of my wines here, but also to be able to tune in and listen to how you present and everything. So a wonderful experience. Thank you very much for that. Cabernet Sauvignon from Argentina. You know, it sounds new to people, but as you mentioned, Evan, very much so it's not. I mean, it was our hallmark varietal before Malbec came onto the world stage and kind of took over everyone's kind of identity of Argentina. But for most of the 20th century, Cabernet Sauvignon was king. So we have a very long tradition with Cabernet Sauvignon. For most of the 20th century, our top wines were Cabernet Sauvignon based. So it's quite right to say that Cabernet Sauvignon does have a place in Argentina. And you know, as we go forward in showing what Argentina can do, its diversity, and what it can do above and beyond Malbec, I think Cabernet Sauvignon and the other varietal that's in there that's kind of plays with it, Cabernet Franc, are two varietals that I think increasingly we're going to be able to show people that Argentina, Mendoza, the Uco Valley has a lot more diversity and has the breadth to make some very, very interesting wines.
Jeff,
Jeff, can you speak to, oh, sorry.
No, I was going to ask one question, then I'll shut up because I talk too much. But there's like 1,200 and something vineyards in the Uco Valley, and this is clearly a vineyard of extraordinary personality. Just a quick, how did you salute this vineyard? Why did you choose this vineyard? And was it because of the Cabernet, or was it something else going on?
Well, this vineyard, we purchased the land for this vineyard back with Alejandro in the late, around 2008. We actually purchased it as an apple orchard and went about pulling out an apple orchard and putting vines back in. Previously, around 50 years ago, this was a Malbec vineyard in Paraje Altamira that, because of the viticultural crisis that we had in the 70s, was pulled out and planted to an apple orchard. So the idea that this comes from Alejandro's experience with the Catena family, planting several very, very interesting vineyards. Nicasia is one of the hallmark vineyards of the area and one of the hallmark vineyards of the Catena family. And so with Alejandro's experience as vineyard director with the Catena family and seeing what Altamira was going to do, when we began looking at doing our own wines, this was the place where we really wanted to start with. So it was a little bit of his background with Catena that drew us to the area. And this is a vineyard that has a high content of limestone, which is something that you mentioned as being part of Altamira. That's something that really was very interesting for us. And so there were those two components: Alejandro's experience with Altamira with the Catena family, finding a parcel that had a lot of limestone, and it was available.
Great. Madeline, I'm sorry for interrupting you earlier.
No, I was simply going to circle back to what one of our attendee friends asked about the expression of pyrazine in Argentine Cabernet Sauvignon, because, you know, is that extreme altitude affecting the expression? Do you find less of that, you know, bell pepper green element in Argentine quality Cabernets grown at high altitudes? Can you generalize it all about that?
I think you can, and I think and you both mentioned this at different times, so I'm very pleased that we'll have a chance to just extrapolate a little bit more. This is a vineyard that is at a little bit over 4,000 feet elevation. So as Evan and you both mentioned, that means cool climate. That means cool temperature. So we could start by talking about cool climate Cabernet Sauvignon, which sometimes might lead people to think of a certain greenness that should be part of the pyrazine expression. But we find it to be quite the opposite. In cool climate Cabernet Sauvignon, we find that the ripening process is very gradual. It's very even, it's very moderate, and it's quite long. And so we find our pyrazines, instead of being green, they get a little bit more ripeness to them. And so they go from what I humbly like to sometimes call, they move from a vegetal green into a fresh green. They move from a vegetal green into an herbal green, let's say. And so they're moving away from that bell pepper
more into mint, that type of thing.
Exactly.
But you also have that tremendous sunlight. I mean, you're high altitude, but you've got ultraviolet light, you know, that move away everybody else. It gets those grapes right, correct?
Exactly. And it's that combination, which we think is something that's always very unique about the Yucco Valley. I coined a phrase that I like to call refrigerated sunshine, which is, this very, very intense sunlight, but these very cool temperatures. And so the sunlight helps get us great ripeness, but the cool temperatures rein in and slow down that process and make sure that it happens in a very kind of gradual nature, giving us at the end of the day, not just great sugar or alcohol or fruit ripeness, but all of the kind of aromatic ripeness that we're looking for, be it in Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc or even Malbec as well.
Beautiful. Okay.
I just want to give I want to give our audience a chance. I know a lot of you were here earlier and had already left, but those of you who stayed, if you have a question, especially for Jeff or Ali directly, you can unmute yourself and pose your question. Don't be shy.
Well, I'll jump in. It seems to have a little bit of a old world sensibility, which I really love, and I'm guessing that's intentional. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, certainly. We're very much inspired. I mean, I think to put Argentina in context a little bit, I think of Argentina as an old world country that just happens to be in the new world. If you know anything about our culture, we are an immigrant culture that's based a lot on Spanish immigration, even very recent 19th and 20th century Italian immigration. We have an old world wine sensibility and culture about us in terms of we drink a lot of wine. It's on the tables of every restaurant. Wine is a big part of our life, our culture, and our industry reflects that. So I think that Argentina is kind of, as a country, rediscovering its old world wine roots. And I think the current generation of winemakers and viticulturalists is moving in that style. So I always like to say, we mentioned sunshine, we mentioned altitude. You can think of Argentina as a high elevation desert. And so that means that we always have ripeness in our fruit. And so Alejandro and I believe that in order to elevate our wines, we have to add or find ways of adding other flavors and other aromas into the kind of core of ripe fruit that's going to be part of our terroir because of that desert kind of conditions. And so that brings us into a kind of old world savory kind of element. We look for limestone in our soils. Limestone for us gives us a certain savoriness, a certain brininess, a certain salty minerality. We work a lot with whole clusters. We find that our stems also introduce spicy, peppery kind of savory elements. And so I think that leads us towards a kind of more old world sensibility in the expression of our wines, trying to build upon the core of sweet fruit into other elements that can make our wines more complex.
Hey, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for participating, and I hope you enjoyed the wine.
Any other questions? I think we have time for one more question. Or about any other wine.
Or comments.
I mean, I just thought the wine was super interesting because it tasted exactly like Cabernet to me, but I rejected that as a choice because I didn't see any of these other elements. So.
Well, and you maybe didn't think about, if you were even towards Argentina, thinking about Argentine Cabernet Sauvignon, but that's something that, and I'll mention our importer Vino del Sol, and we're trying to make a really big push now to show people that Argentina can produce great Cabernet Sauvignon and help put it on the map. So thank you very much. I'm glad that it spoke to varietal typicity for you, and hopefully increasingly people and tasters of your guys' caliber will look to Argentina for some great Cabernet Sauvignon.